The morning light filtered through the bridal suite windows, casting everything in that golden glow you only see in wedding magazines. I stood in front of the mirror, my hands trembling slightly as I smoothed down the lace of my dress. It wasn't a designer gown. We couldn't afford that, but it was beautiful, elegant, and most importantly, it was mine. You look absolutely stunning, sweetie. My best friend, Natalie, adjusted my veil with careful fingers. Her eyes were already glassy with tears. Brandon is going to lose it when he sees you. I smiled, feeling that flutter in my chest that had been constant for the past 6 months since Brandon proposed. Brandon Mitchell. Even his name made me feel warm inside. We'd met 3 years ago at a community fundraiser where I was volunteering. He was there representing his family's commercial real estate business. Nothing massive, but successful enough that his parents lived in the nicer part of town, the one with the gates and the manicured lawns. My family? We were comfortable. Dad worked as an electrician, Mom managed a local boutique. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house that my parents had been paying off for 20 years. There was no trust fund, no family business to inherit. Just honest work and honest living. But Brandon never cared about any of that. He told me 1,000 times that he fell in love with my laugh, my passion for teaching second graders, the way I'd spend my Saturdays at the animal shelter. Money didn't matter, he'd say. We'd build our life together. Is my mom here yet? I asked Natalie, checking my phone for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. I saw her car pull up about 20 minutes ago. She's probably with the wedding coordinator, making sure everything's perfect. Natalie squeezed my shoulder. You know how she gets. I did know. My mother, Patricia, had been complicated about this wedding from the start. Not disapproving, exactly, but there was something in her eyes whenever Brandon's family was mentioned. A tightness in her smile. A pause before she spoke. She'll come around completely once she sees how happy we are, I told myself more than Natalie. The ceremony was set to take place in the garden of the Riverside Estate, a beautiful venue that Brandon's parents had insisted on paying for. Our only son's wedding, his mother, Caroline, had said with that gracious smile of hers. Let us give you this gift. My parents had been uncomfortable with it at first, pride, I suppose, but eventually agreed when Brandon and I assured them it was important to his family. Mom had contributed by paying for the flowers, and Dad handled the photographer. Everyone was happy. Everyone was getting along. Or so I thought. The knock on the door made my heart jump. 5 minutes, ladies, the wedding coordinator called out. This was it. In 5 minutes, I'd walk down that aisle. In less than an hour, I'd be Mrs. Brandon Mitchell. I'd start the life I'd been dreaming about since the day he got down on one knee at the beach, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Natalie handed me my bouquet. White roses and peonies, simple and classic. Ready. Ready. I breathed. We made our way down to the bridal staging area, a small gazebo hidden from the guests' view. I could hear the string quartet playing, the murmur of voices, someone laughing. Through the lattice work, I caught glimpses of the ceremony space, rows of white chairs filled with friends and family, flowers everywhere, the arbor where Brandon would be waiting for me, draped in greenery and fairy lights even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. My father appeared, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in his suit. His eyes went soft when he saw me. Oh, sweetheart, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Don't make me cry, Dad. Natalie spent an hour on this makeup. He laughed, but I could see his own eyes getting wet. He offered his arm, and I took it, feeling the familiar strength there. This man had taught me to ride a bike, had scared off my first terrible boyfriend, had worked double shifts to make sure I could go to college without drowning in debt. I love you, Dad, I whispered. I love you too, baby girl. And I'm so proud of you. The music changed. There it was, the wedding march. My cue. Natalie, already in position as my maid of honor, gave me one last smile before she began her walk down the aisle. Here we go, Dad said softly. We rounded the corner, and suddenly I could see everything. Nearly 200 faces turned toward me, all smiling, some already crying. The garden was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. The late spring flowers in full bloom, the the sun warm but not too hot. And there, at the end of the aisle, stood Brandon. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His hand went to his chest, and even from this distance, I could see the tears streaming down his face. His best man, Cole, handed him a tissue, grinning. Brandon's parents sat in the front row, Caroline dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, his father Thomas nodding approvingly. Everything was perfect. We began our walk, Dad's arm steady under mine. Step by step, smile after smile. My coworkers from school, waving. Brandon's business partners. Distant relatives. Friends from college. Everyone was there, everyone was happy, everyone was celebrating us. Halfway down the aisle, I spotted my mother. She sat in the front row opposite Brandon's parents, wearing the navy dress we'd picked out together last month. But something was wrong. While everyone else was smiling, watching me with joy and tears, my mother's face was stone. Completely expressionless. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, her posture rigid. A cold feeling crept into my stomach, but I pushed it away. Wedding jitters. Pre-ceremony nerves. She was probably just emotional and trying to hold it together. We reached the arbor. Dad lifted my veil and kissed my cheek. "Be happy," he whispered, then placed my hand in Brandon's before taking his seat next to Mom. Brandon squeezed my hand, his eyes full of so much love it made my chest ache. "Hi," he mouthed. "Hi," I mouthed back. The officiant, a kind older man named Pastor Williams who'd known Brandon's family for years, smiled at us both. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I barely heard the opening words. I was too busy looking at Brandon, at the life I saw reflected in his eyes. Our future. Our home. Our children someday. It was all right there, just moments away. "Before we begin the vows," Pastor Williams said, his voice carrying across the silent garden, "we have a special moment planned. The mothers of the bride and groom would like to offer their blessings to this union." This had been Caroline's idea. A sweet gesture, she'd called it. Both mothers would stand, say a few words of blessing and wisdom, and then we'd move into the vows. I'd thought it was lovely, traditional, meaningful. Caroline stood first, elegant in her cream-colored dress. She walked to the microphone that had been set up to the side of the arbor. "Brandon, my dear son," she began, her voice warm and clear. "From the moment you were born, I knew you were destined for great things. And when you brought Lily into our lives, I knew you'd found your match. She is kind, intelligent, and loving, everything I could have hoped for in a daughter. I bless this marriage with my whole heart, and I welcome Lily into our family with open arms." There was a soft chorus of "ahs" from the crowd. Caroline came over, kissed Brandon's cheek, then mine, before returning to her seat. Now it was my mother's turn. Pastor Williams gestured toward her. "And now, if the mother of the bride would like to share her blessing." For a long, horrible moment, nothing happened. Mom sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Dad leaned over, whispered something to her. She didn't move. "Mom?" I heard myself say, my voice small and confused. The silence stretched. People began shifting in their seats, confused murmurs starting to ripple through the crowd. Brandon's hand tightened on mine. Finally, slowly, my mother stood. But she didn't move toward the microphone. She stood in place, her hands still folded, her face still that terrible blank mask. "Patricia?" Pastor Williams prompted gently. "Would you like to share a blessing for your daughter?" My mother's eyes met mine, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something far worse. It was contempt. "No," she said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silent garden, it carried perfectly. "No, I will not bless this marriage." The world seemed to tilt. I heard Caroline gasp. Brandon's grip on my hand became almost painful. "Mom, what?" I started, but she cut me off. "I will not stand here and bless a union built on lies and theft." Her voice grew stronger, louder. She was still looking at me, but somehow also looking at everyone. "I will not smile and pretend that this is a happy occasion when I know the truth about the Mitchell family." "Patricia, please," Pastor Williams began, but she ignored him. Brandon stepped forward. "Mrs. Anderson, I don't know what you think you know, but—" "I know," my mother said, her voice rising to a shout that made people jump, "that 23 years ago, Thomas Mitchell stole the land that my father's business was built on. I know that he used his connections and his money to tie my father up in legal battles until he lost everything. I know that my father died of a heart attack at 52 years old, broken and bankrupt, while the Mitchells built their little real estate empire on property that should have been ours." The silence that followed was deafening. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My mind was trying to process what she'd just said, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. Thomas Mitchell stood up, his face red. "That is a lie. That property was purchased legally, and with a forged deed." My mother's voice cracked. "You think I don't have proof? You think I've spent the last 23 years doing nothing? I have documents, Thomas. I have evidence. And I've been waiting for the perfect moment to destroy you the way you destroyed my family." She finally looked away from me, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. Every eye was on her, wide with shock. My daughter doesn't know. She doesn't know that her grandfather, her sweet, kind grandfather who she barely remembers, lost everything to these people. She doesn't know that her childhood could have been completely different if the Mitchells hadn't stolen what was rightfully ours. She doesn't know that I've been investigating them for years, gathering evidence, waiting for the right time to bring them down. Tears were streaming down my face now. "Mom, please stop." She turned back to me, and now I could see the pain beneath the anger. The years of it. "I couldn't let you marry into this family without knowing the truth, Lily. I couldn't let you bind yourself to them, not after what they did to us, to your grandfather, to me." Brandon's father was shouting something. Caroline was crying. People were standing up, talking over each other. The beautiful garden ceremony had become chaos in a matter of minutes. And I stood there in my not-quite-designer dress, holding my bouquet of white roses and peonies, watching my fairy tale collapse into a nightmare. "I'm sorry, baby," my mother said, and her voice was softer now, almost pleading. "But you needed to know. Before you made vows you can't take back. You needed to know who they really are." I looked at Brandon. His face was white, his expression one of complete shock. "Lily, I swear I didn't know anything about this. I swear. I couldn't finish the sentence. I couldn't breathe. The corset of my dress suddenly felt too tight, the sun too hot, everything too much. I turned and ran, my dress's train catching on chairs, my veil falling somewhere behind me. I heard Natalie calling my name, heard Brandon shouting, but I didn't stop. I ran past the stunned guests, past the perfect flower arrangements, past the life I'd thought I was about to begin. I made it to the bridal suite before I collapsed, my knees hitting the plush carpet, my hands clutching at the dress that was supposed to represent the happiest day of my life. Behind me, I could hear the chaos continuing. Voices raised in anger. Someone crying. The sound of chairs scraping. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't leave the bridal suite for 2 hours. Natalie eventually found me, still in my dress, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall, staring at nothing. She sat down next to me without a word, just took my hand and held it. Outside, I could hear fragments of what was happening. Guests leaving, some angry, some confused. Car doors slamming. Someone, Brandon, I thought, shouting about lawyers. His father's voice, defensive and loud. And beneath it all, my mother's steady, unwavering tone. She wasn't backing down. She wasn't apologizing. "What do you want to do?" Natalie finally asked. I shook my head. I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. 6 hours ago, I'd woken up thinking I knew exactly who I was marrying, what my life would be. Now I felt like I'd been living in a play, and someone had just torn down all the sets to reveal the bare stage behind them. "Your dad is looking for you," Natalie said gently. "He's worried sick." "Is he angry? At Mom?" "I don't know. I think he's in shock, like everyone else. But Lily, the things your mom is saying, the documents she's showing people, it looks real. It looks really real." A soft knock on the door made us both jump. Lily. It was my father's voice. Can I come in, sweetheart? I nodded to Natalie, who got up and opened the door. Dad stepped in, and the sight of him, his face drawn and tired, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened, made something break inside me. I started crying again, huge gasping sobs that shook my whole body. He was beside me in an instant, pulling me into his arms the way he had when I was little and had scraped my knee or lost a friend. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you, baby girl." "Did you know?" I managed to choke out between sobs. "About Grandpa? About any of this?" He pulled back slightly, enough to look at me. His eyes were red. "Some of it. Not all. Your mother, she never told me the full extent of what she'd been doing. The investigating, the evidence gathering. I knew she had issues with the Mitchell family, knew there was bad blood from before we met, but I thought it was old business rivalry stuff. I never knew it went this deep. Why didn't you tell me? When I started dating Brandon, why didn't you say something?" "Because I didn't think it was relevant anymore. Your grandfather died when you were 5, Lily. It was ancient history. And Brandon seemed like a good man. He treated you well, made you happy. Your mother seemed to be holding it together, so I thought." He sighed heavily. "I thought we could move past it. I was wrong." "Where is she? Where's Mom?" "Downstairs in the main hall with the Mitchells. There are lawyers involved now. They're going through documents." He touched my face gently. "Lily, I need you to prepare yourself. What your mother has, if it's all legitimate, this is going to get very ugly. The Mitchells' entire business, their wealth, their reputation, it's all at stake. I don't care about their business." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "I care that my wedding just got destroyed. I care that my mother has been lying to me for months, maybe years. I care that Brandon—" My voice broke. "God, Dad, what does this mean for Brandon and me?" He didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. Another knock, more hesitant this time. "Lily? It's me." Brandon's voice. I looked at my father, panicked. He squeezed my hand. "It's your call, sweetheart. But if you're going to talk to him, you need to hear him out. This isn't his fault any more than it's yours." I stood up on shaky legs, my dress rustling around me. A ridiculous fairy tale costume in the middle of a nightmare. "Come in." Brandon opened the door slowly, and I almost started crying again at the sight of him. He still had his boutonniere on. His hair was messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were swollen. "Can we talk? Please?" His voice was hoarse. Dad stood up. "I'll be right outside if you need me," he said to me, then looked at Brandon. "You hurt my daughter any more than she's already been hurt today, and I don't care whose son you are." "Yes, sir. I understand." Dad left, closing the door behind him. Natalie had slipped out at some point without me even noticing. It was just Brandon and me, still in our wedding clothes, in a room that should have been filled with celebration and champagne. "I didn't know," he said immediately. "I swear on everything I love, Lily, I had no idea about any of this. My father never told me. He stopped, his jaw clenching. But I should have known something. There were times when your family was mentioned and my dad would get this look. Change the subject fast. I thought it was just, I don't know, class stuff. The difference in our backgrounds. I never imagined." "Is it true?" I cut him off. "What my mom is saying? About the land, the forged deed, my grandfather?" "I don't know. My father swears it's not, but—" He ran his hand through his hair again. "Your mom has documents, Lily. Financial records, property deeds, correspondence. Things that look really bad. My dad is scrambling, calling our family lawyers, but from what I'm hearing," he met my eyes. "It might be true. Some of it, maybe all of it. And if it is, your entire family's wealth is built on fraud. On destroying my family. Yes." The word came out like a confession. "And I know what that means. I know what you must think of me right now." "I don't know what I think." I wrapped my arms around myself. "This morning, I woke up ready to marry the man I love. Now I'm finding out that your family ruined mine, and my mother has been plotting some kind of revenge for years, and I'm caught in the middle of a war I didn't even know existed. I love you, Brandon said desperately. That hasn't changed. Whatever my father did or didn't do, whatever happens next, I love you, Lily. That's real. We're real. Are we? The question came out smaller than I intended. How can we be real when everything else is a lie? Before he could answer, there was a commotion outside. Raised voices, my mother's the loudest. Then a crash, like something heavy falling. Brandon and I rushed to the door. The scene in the main hall below was chaos. Tables had been pushed together and were covered with papers, clearly my mother's evidence. Thomas Mitchell stood on one side, his lawyer beside him, both looking increasingly pale as they examined documents. My mother stood on the other side with Dad behind her, looking like an avenging angel. Caroline sat in a chair off to the side, her perfect composure completely shattered, mascara running down her face. This is fake, Thomas was shouting. These documents are fabricated. You've spent years building an elaborate forgery. Then explain the signatures, my mother said coldly. Explain why your signature appears on a deed that was supposedly signed by my father, when handwriting analysis, which I've had done by 3 independent experts, shows it's clearly your handwriting trying to mimic his. This is insane. You're insane. I have bank records showing the payoffs to the county clerk who pushed the fraudulent deed through. I have emails, yes, Thomas, emails from the early days of the internet that you thought were long deleted, discussing how to handle the Anderson problem. I have testimony from your former business partner, Richard Brennan, who was willing to talk once I showed him what I had. Richard Brennan. I knew that name. He'd been at family dinners at the Mitchell's house. A jovial older man who'd always seemed so kind. Thomas's face went from red to purple. Richard wouldn't. Richard is dying of cancer and wanted to clear his conscience. He told me everything. How you two planned it. How you convinced him it was just business. How my father threatened to expose you both, so you buried him in legal fees until he had to sell everything just to survive. How you bought the property for pennies on the dollar once he was broken. The lawyer was frantically taking notes, his face grim. This wasn't looking good for the Mitchells. Brandon's hand found mine, held tight. We stood at the top of the stairs, watching our families destroy each other. Even if this is all true, Thomas said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, the statute of limitations is passed. You can't do anything legally. This is just harassment. Oh, I'm not interested in criminal charges, my mother said with a smile that was terrifying in its coldness. I'm interested in civil court. Fraud has a longer statute of limitations when it's been actively concealed, as yours has been. And I'm interested in the court of public opinion. By tomorrow morning, every media outlet in the state will have copies of this evidence. Your business partners, your clients, your investors, they'll all know what kind of man you really are. You vindictive. I'm not vindictive. I'm just giving you what you gave my father. Ruin. Complete and total ruin. She gathered up some of the papers. You have 2 options, Thomas. Option 1. We go to court. This all becomes public. Your business collapses, your reputation is destroyed, and you spend the next decade fighting lawsuits while your assets are frozen and your family name becomes synonymous with fraud. Or, his voice was barely a whisper, or you make restitution. You pay my family what we would have earned from that property over the past 23 years. Based on the current value of the land and the commercial developments on it, my lawyers estimate that's roughly $47 million. The number hung in the air like a bomb. Brandon's hand in mine went slack. Caroline made us sound like a wounded animal. We don't have that kind of money liquid. The business, the properties. Then you sell them, my mother said simply. You liquidate what you need to. You feel what it's like to lose everything, the way my father did. The way my family did. This is extortion, the Mitchell lawyer said, finally finding his voice. No, this is justice. You have 72 hours to decide. After that, everything goes public, and you can take your chances with the legal system and the media. My mother looked up then, and her eyes found mine at the top of the stairs. For just a moment, her hard expression softened. I'm sorry, Lily. I truly am. But this needed to be done. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The number kept echoing in my head. $47 million. That would destroy the Mitchells. Completely. Everything they'd built, everything they were, gone. And my mother was the one holding the detonator. Brandon pulled away from me, stumbled down the stairs. Dad? Is it true? Did you really do what she's saying? Thomas looked at his son, and for the first time, I saw him not as the confident businessman, but as an old man who'd been caught. Brandon, son, you have to understand. It was business. It was just business. The way things were done back then. Did you do it? Brandon's voice cracked. Did you forge documents? Did you destroy her family? The silence was answer enough. Brandon turned away from his father, his shoulders shaking. I wanted to go to him, but I couldn't make my feet move. Some invisible line had been drawn through the middle of that hall, and I didn't know which side I belonged on anymore. I need everyone to clear out, the Mitchell lawyer said, his voice tired. This is now a legal matter, and I need to confer with my clients. The wedding is obviously canceled. Obviously. My mother cut him off, her voice dripping with sarcasm. People started moving. Natalie appeared at my side again, along with my father. Let's get you changed, she said softly. Get you home. But I stood frozen, watching as Brandon walked past his father without a word, past his weeping mother, past everything. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked up at me. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it. You deserved better than this. Then he was gone, walking out into the fading sunlight, and I wondered if I'd ever see him again. 3 days. That's how long it took for our lives to completely implode. I spent the first day in bed, still in shock. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from friends, family, even people I barely knew, all wanting to know what happened, if I was okay, if the rumors were true. I turned it off and stared at the ceiling. Natalie brought me food I didn't eat. Dad checked on me every few hours. Mom stayed in her study, on the phone with lawyers, preparing for what came next. By the second day, it hit the news. Local first, then regional. Mitchell real estate empire built on fraud? The headline screamed. Wedding becomes courtroom drama. Someone had filmed my mother's confrontation. Of course they had. Everyone has their phones out at weddings, and clips were circulating online. I watched it once, saw my own face frozen in shock at the top of those stairs, and couldn't watch again. My principal called. The school board had some concerns about the media attention. Maybe I should take some time off. Maybe a lot of time off. The subtext was clear. Come back when you're no longer a spectacle. Brandon tried to call. 17 times. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say to him. I loved him. God, I still loved him, which somehow made everything worse. But how could we have a future now? His family had destroyed mine. My mother had destroyed his. We were casualties in a war that started before we were born. On the third day, the deadline my mother had given Thomas, I finally left my room. I needed answers. I needed to understand how we'd gotten here. I found Mom in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reviewing documents. She looked up when I entered, and I saw the dark circles under her eyes, the lines of stress around her mouth. She looked older than she had 4 days ago. Lily, she said softly, how are you feeling? How do you think I'm feeling? My voice came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't apologize. My wedding was destroyed. My relationship is over. I'm probably going to lose my job. And my mother has been keeping life-altering secrets from me. She flinched. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. But Lily, you have to understand. Then help me understand. Start from the beginning. She took a long breath, set down her coffee cup. Your grandfather, my father, was Daniel Anderson. He owned a small but successful commercial property development company. Nothing huge but solid. Profitable. He had one particular piece of land, 60 acres on the outskirts of town that was zoned for commercial development. This was the early 2000s, and that area was just starting to boom. That land was going to make him millions. I sat down across from her, listening. Thomas Mitchell wanted it. He made offers, but your grandfather refused. The land had been in our family for 3 generations. It was supposed to be my inheritance, my security. So Thomas decided to take it another way. Her hands clenched around her coffee cup. He had a friend in the county clerk's office. Together, they forged a deed showing that Thomas had purchased the land years earlier. They backdated everything, created false documentation. When your grandfather challenged it, Thomas buried him in legal fees. Dad said Grandpa died of a heart attack.
He did.
After 2 years of fighting, after losing everything trying to prove the land was his, after the stress and the betrayal destroyed his health, yes, he had a heart attack. He was 52 years old. Her voice cracked. I found him on his office floor, surrounded by legal documents he couldn't afford and couldn't win against. The pain in her voice was raw, real. And I understood suddenly that this wasn't just about money or property. This was about a daughter watching her father die of a broken heart. Why didn't you go to the police? Report the fraud. I tried. I was 25, Lily. Devastated, broke, and going up against one of the wealthiest families in the county. No one believed me. Thomas's lawyers were too good, his connections too strong. So I did what I had to do. I stepped back. I married your father. We built a quiet life, and everyone thought I'd let it go. But you didn't.
No.
I spent years learning the law, understanding property fraud, building connections of my own. I worked at the boutique, yes, but that gave me access to people, wealthy people who knew other wealthy people. I listened. I learned. And I investigated. Every spare moment for 23 years I was building my case, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. And that moment was my wedding? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. You couldn't have found literally any other time? I needed witnesses. I needed the impact. If I'd done this quietly, Thomas would have tied it up in legal complications for another decade. But doing it publicly, in front of 200 people including several of his business associates? He can't sweep this under the rug. He can't make it quietly disappear. You used my wedding as a weapon. Yes.
She didn't try to deny it.
And I know that makes me a terrible mother. I know I hurt you in a way I can never fully repair. But Lily, if you'd married into that family, you'd have been legally bound to them. Community property laws, family businesses, you would have been entangled with the Mitchell empire. I couldn't let that happen. Not to my daughter. You could have told me. Before I fell in love with him, before I said yes to his proposal, you could have told me the truth. Would you have believed me? She asked quietly. If I'd set you down when you first started dating Brandon and told you this story, would you have believed your mother? Or would you have thought I was being paranoid, bitter, jealous of his family's success? I wanted to say I would have believed her, but honestly, I probably wouldn't have. I'd been so in love, so happy. I would have seen her concerns as controlling, as trying to sabotage my relationship. This is a mess, I said finally. Everyone's lives are ruined. Not everyone. We'll be fine. Better than fine. If Thomas pays the restitution, we'll finally have what should have been ours all along. Blood money. Justice, she corrected. There's a difference. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. We looked at each other. Dad appeared from the living room, where he'd apparently been listening to our conversation. I'll get it. We heard the door open, heard Dad's surprised voice. Brandon. I don't think. Please, Mr. Anderson. I just need 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes with Lily. My mother started to stand, her face hardening, but I held up my hand. It's okay. I'll talk to him. Lily. He deserves that much, Mom. Whatever his father did, Brandon didn't do it. He's as much a victim here as I am. She didn't look happy, but she sat back down. I walked to the front door, where Dad was blocking Brandon's entry. Brandon looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. 5 minutes, I said to Dad. It's okay. Dad stepped aside reluctantly, and Brandon and I walked out onto the front porch. It was a beautiful spring evening, the kind we should have been spending on our honeymoon in Hawaii. Instead, we stood on opposite sides of my parents' porch, an ocean of damage between us. They're settling, Brandon said without preamble. My father agreed to your mother's terms. He's liquidating assets, selling properties. You'll have your $47 million within the month. I felt dizzy. Brandon. It's not just about the money, though that's devastating enough. It's everything else. The scandal, the media. Business partners are severing contracts. Investors are pulling out. My father's reputation is completely destroyed. My mother, his voice broke. My mother had to be sedated yesterday. She can't process what's happening. I'm sorry, and I was. Despite everything, I didn't want this. I didn't want anyone to suffer. The worst part is that he did it. He actually did it, Lily. Every single thing your mother accused him of. He confessed to me yesterday. He tried to justify it, said it was just how business was done, that your grandfather should have taken his offer when he had the chance. Like that makes it okay. Like ruining a man's life and literally working him to death is just business. He looked at me with those eyes I'd fallen in love with, now filled with anguish. I don't know who my father is anymore, and I don't know if I can forgive him. My whole life, he taught me about integrity, about hard work, about earning what you have.
And it was all built on a lie.
On theft and fraud. Brandon, what your father did isn't your fault. But it affects us, doesn't it? That's why you haven't returned my calls. That's why you're standing 6 feet away from me like I'm contaminated. That's not fair. I'm standing here because I'm hurt and confused, and my entire world fell apart 3 days ago. Not because of you, because of all of this. Can we survive it? He asked quietly. Can we get past this? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to run to him, have him hold me, pretend we could just leave all of this behind and start over somewhere new.
But life doesn't work that way.
I don't know, I admitted. Your family destroyed mine. My mother destroyed yours. How do we build a life together with that foundation? Every family gathering, every holiday, it would all be poisoned by this. Your parents would hate me, or at least my family. My mother. I trailed off, thinking about the cold determination in her eyes. My mother orchestrated the complete destruction of your family's legacy. How do you forgive that? Maybe we don't have to forgive it. Maybe we just have to move forward despite it. That's naive, Brandon. This isn't some Romeo and Juliet story where love conquers all. This is real life with real consequences. Your family is losing millions. Mine is gaining millions. That kind of shift in power, in status, it changes everything. He stepped closer, and I let him. I love you. That hasn't changed. Love isn't always enough. Then what is? What would be enough for you to give us a chance? Before I could answer, my mother appeared at the door. Lily, honey, my lawyer is on the phone. He needs to discuss something with both of us. It's about the settlement. Brandon looked at her with an expression I couldn't read. Anger? Respect?
Fear?
Maybe all three. Mrs. Anderson. Brandon. Her voice was neutral, carefully controlled. I heard your father agreed to terms. You gave him no choice. He gave himself no choice 23 years ago when he decided to build his empire on fraud.
She turned to me.
Lily. I looked between them. My mother, who'd sacrificed my wedding for justice. Brandon, who'd done nothing wrong but inherited his father's sins. Give me a minute. Mom nodded and went back inside. Brandon and I stood in silence for a moment. I need time, I finally said, to process everything. To figure out who I am now, because I don't recognize my life anymore. And you need time too, to deal with your family, with what's happening to them. So, this is goodbye? I don't know what this is. But it can't be what it was before. We can't just pick up where we left off. He nodded slowly, his eyes getting wet. For what it's worth, Lily, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. You still are. Brandon. And I hope, someday, when all of this settles down, when the dust clears, maybe we can try again. Start over. Build something real that isn't haunted by our parents' mistakes. Maybe, I whispered, though I didn't believe it. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, a gentle goodbye. Then he walked down the porch steps, got into his car, and drove away. I watched until his taillights disappeared around the corner. When I went back inside, Mom was waiting with the phone. The lawyer says the first transfer will happen within a week. 20 million up front, the rest in installments over the next 6 months. $20 million. The number didn't feel real. Nothing felt real anymore. What are you going to do with it? I asked. Pay off the house. Set up college funds for any future grandchildren. Invest most of it. Live comfortably. She paused. And give you half. I stared at her. What? You're entitled to it. This was about your grandfather, yes, but also about securing your future. $23 million, Lily. You'll never have to worry about money again. You can quit teaching if you want, travel, do whatever makes you happy. I don't want the money. I want my life back. I want the last 4 days to not have happened. I know. She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. I know I can't give you that. But I can give you financial security, freedom, opportunities. Built on the ruins of the family I was supposed to marry into. Built on justice finally being served, she corrected. The Mitchells will survive this, Lily. They'll be less wealthy, less powerful, but they'll survive. We survived worse. Your grandfather didn't survive at all. I walked to the window, looked out at the quiet suburban street where I'd grown up. I need to get out of here. Out of this town, away from all of this. Where will you go? I don't know. Anywhere. I just need space to figure out who I am now. Mom didn't argue. Maybe she understood that she'd gotten what she wanted. Justice, retribution, financial restitution, but the cost had been her relationship with me. Or, at least the easy, trusting relationship we'd had before. That night, I started packing. I didn't have a plan, didn't know where I was going or for how long. I just knew I couldn't stay here, in this town full of memories and rumors and the wreckage of 2 families. My phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. I'm here if you need me. Always. And then another text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Cole, Brandon's best man. He wanted me to tell you he got an offer for a job in Seattle. He's leaving next week. Thought you should know. Seattle. 3,000 miles away. Brandon was running too, I realized. We were both trying to escape the disaster our families had created. I sat on my bed, surrounded by half-packed suitcases, and finally let myself cry. Not the shocked, hysterical tears of the wedding day, but deep, soul-shaking sobs for everything I'd lost. My fiancé.
My job.
My innocence about who my family really was. The simple belief that love could overcome anything. Dad knocked softly and came in without waiting for an answer. He sat next to me, pulled me into his arms like he had when I was little, and let me cry on his shoulder. It gets better, he said quietly. Not right away, and not all at once. But it gets better. How do you know? Because your mother and I survived losing everything when your grandfather died. We rebuilt. We found happiness again. You will too. Did you know? I asked, pulling back to look at him. When Mom was planning all of this, gathering evidence for years, did you know what she was going to do? He hesitated. I knew she was investigating the Mitchells. I didn't know she was planning to detonate everything at your wedding. If I had known. He sighed. I would have tried to stop her. For your sake. Would she have listened?
No.
Probably not. Your mother is the strongest, most determined woman I've ever known. When she sets her mind to something, nothing can change it. It's one of the things I love about her. It's also one of the most terrifying things about her. I don't know if I can forgive her. You don't have to. Not right now. Maybe not ever. That's your choice. He kissed the top of my head. But wherever you go, whatever you do, remember that you're not alone. You have people who love you. Imperfect, complicated people who make terrible decisions sometimes, but who love you. After he left, I continued packing. In the morning, I would be gone. Where to, I still didn't know. But forward. Always forward. Because going back wasn't an option anymore. The fairy tale was over. Reality had arrived with all its sharp edges and difficult truths. And somehow, I had to figure out how to live in it. 6 months later, I stood in my tiny apartment in Portland, Oregon, watching the rain streak down the window. Portland, not too far from Seattle, but far enough. Far enough from my past, from the memories, from the ruins of the life I'd planned. The money had arrived exactly as Mom's lawyer promised. $23.5 million, sitting in various investment accounts managed by a financial advisor I'd hired. I'd use some of it to pay off my student loans, buy this apartment outright, and set up a modest trust that would generate enough income that I never had to worry about money again. But I'd gone back to teaching. Not at my old school. They'd been relieved when I resigned, but at a small private school here in Portland that didn't Google their applicants or care about my small-town scandal. Mrs. Crawford, they called me now. I'd gone back to my maiden name. Being a Mitchell, even almost a Mitchell, felt wrong. My phone buzzed. A text from Natalie, who'd become my lifeline over these months. Coffee this weekend? I'm driving up from California. I miss your face. I smiled. Natalie had left our hometown too, taken a job in San Francisco. Sometimes I wondered if anyone was left there, or if the scandal had driven everyone away. Another text came through, this one from Dad. Your mother wants to know if you're coming home for Thanksgiving. No pressure, but we'd love to see you. Home. I still wasn't sure where that was anymore. The house I'd grown up in? This apartment? Somewhere I hadn't found yet? I hadn't spoken to Mom since I left 6 months ago. We texted occasionally, brief, factual updates about health, weather, nothing of substance. The wound was still too fresh. Maybe it would always be too fresh. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the doorman usually called up first. Cautiously, I looked through the peephole. Brandon. My heart lurched. I hadn't seen him since that night on my parents' porch. I'd heard updates through the grapevine. Cole had moved to Seattle with him. They were working for some tech startup. Brandon was trying to rebuild his life too. But we hadn't spoken. Not once in 6 months. I opened the door. He looked different. Thinner. His hair was longer, messier. He wore jeans and a worn sweater. Nothing like the business casual I was used to seeing him in. But his eyes were the same.
Hi, he said.
Hi. My voice came out barely above a whisper. How did you find me? Natalie. I called her last week, told her I was driving down to Portland for a work thing. Asked if she knew where you were. He shifted his weight nervously. Is it okay that I'm here? I can leave if you want me to. I should tell him to leave. It would be easier. Cleaner. But instead I stepped back. Come in. He entered slowly, like he wasn't sure he was really welcome. His eyes took in my space, the small but comfortable living room, the bookshelves full of children's literature, the photos I'd hung of my new life here. None of them included him. You're teaching again, he said, noticing the stack of graded papers on my coffee table. 2nd grade. 30 kids who don't know anything about my past and think I'm the coolest person alive because I let them have extra recess. He smiled, and it was like seeing the sun after months of rain. You always were great with kids. An awkward silence fell. We stood in my living room like strangers, when 6 months ago we'd been planning to spend our lives together. Coffee, I offered.
Sure.
Thanks. I busied myself in the kitchen, grateful for something to do with my hands. He sat on my couch, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. How are your parents? I asked as I brought out 2 mugs. Surviving. Barely. He accepted the coffee, wrapped his hands around it. Mom is in therapy. She had a breakdown about a month after everything happened. Couldn't process it all. Dad is different. Quieter. Smaller somehow. The settlement wiped out most of their liquid assets. They had to sell the house, move into a condo. The business is running on a skeleton crew. A lot of our properties were sold off to meet your mother's terms. I'm sorry, don't be. They earned it. His voice was bitter. I've spent the last 6 months coming to terms with the fact that my father is not the man I thought he was. That everything I grew up with, everything I was taught about hard work and integrity, it was all built on a lie. That's not your fault, Brandon. I know. Intellectually, I know that. But it doesn't change how it feels. He set down his coffee. I went to therapy too. Spent a lot of time working through my anger, my guilt, my everything. And did it help?
Some.
I've accepted that I can't change what my father did. I can only control who I am and what I do going forward. He looked at me directly. I quit the family business. I'm working in tech now, something completely different. Cole and I are building an app together. It might fail, but at least it's ours.
Clean.
No history, no blood money. That's good. I'm proud of you. At the cost of my closure, my wedding, my relationship.
Yes.
And I'm sorry. More sorry than I can ever express. But I also won't pretend I regret getting justice for your grandfather. Both things can be true. I can be sorry for hurting you and still be glad I exposed the truth. It wasn't the apology I wanted, but it was honest. And maybe that was more important. Brandon came to see me today, I said. I heard her sharp intake of breath. And I still love him. Despite everything, I still love him. What are you going to do? I don't know. He gave me a key to his apartment. Not an ultimatum, just an option. A possibility for someday. Do you think you can forgive his family? Move past what his father did? I don't know that either.
But Mom.
Brandon isn't his father.
Just like I'm not you.
We're not responsible for what our parents did to each other. No, you're not. But you're affected by it whether you want to be or not. I know. But maybe we can choose to not let it define us. Maybe we can build something new that isn't haunted by the past. That's very optimistic coming from someone who hasn't spoken to her mother in 6 months. I almost smiled.
Yeah, well.
Maybe I'm trying to be brave. Someone recently told me I'm stronger than I think. They're right. You are. She paused. Are you going to Seattle? Not now. But maybe someday. When I'm ready. And when will that be? I don't know. But I think I'll know when it happens. We talked for a while longer. Careful, tentative conversation that didn't erase the hurt, but started to acknowledge it. When we hung up, I didn't feel healed, but I felt like healing might be possible someday. I looked at the key Brandon had left me, sitting on my coffee table next to my graded papers and my cold coffee. A possibility. A someday. I picked it up and put it on my keychain next to my apartment key and my car key. Not because I was ready to use it, but because I wanted to carry the possibility with me. The hope that maybe, someday, when both of us had healed enough, when the wounds weren't so fresh, we could try again. The fairy tale was over. But maybe, just maybe, a real story was waiting to begin. 18 months later. The Seattle rain was different from Portland rain.
Heavier.
More insistent. I stood outside the building, key in hand, my suitcase at my feet. I'd called ahead this time. I'm ready. I'd told Brandon over the phone last week. If the offer still stands, I'm ready to try. It stands, he'd said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. It'll always stand. I'd transferred my teaching license, found a job at a school in Seattle that started in the fall. I'd sublet my Portland apartment for a year, not selling it, not yet, because I was learning to take things one step at a time. My mother and I had dinner once a month now. Still careful, still healing, but talking. Really talking. Dad visited when he could. And I'd learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing. It just meant choosing to move forward despite the hurt. The door to the building opened, and there was Brandon. Older, wiser, still beautiful to me. He looked at me standing there in the rain, and his whole face lit up. You came, he said. I came. No guarantees, I warned as he reached for my suitcase. No promises of happily ever after. We're starting from scratch. Starting from scratch is my specialty these days. He grinned. Come on. Let me show you your room. Cole moved out last month, so you've got the one with the better view. We walked inside together, and it felt right. Not like a fairy tale. Those, I'd learned, were dangerous. But like a real story. Messy, complicated, uncertain, but real. The wedding had been a disaster. But maybe that disaster had burned away all the illusions, leaving only what was genuine. And maybe what was genuine was enough to build on. Welcome home, Brandon said as we stepped into the elevator. Home. Not his home or my home, but ours to figure out together. Thanks, I said. And I meant it. The fairy tale was over. But the real story? That was just beginning.